Hello, thanks for joining us on the news. I'm Ruth Aguele. My sign language interpreter is Shegun Ajayi. We're starting with the headlines. Sudan seek humanitarian corridor and an end to Sudan crisis. Future of human rights in focus as the world marks Press Freedom Day. Plus, President Muhammadu Buhari unveils Agenda 2050 development plan for Nigeria. Representatives of the United Nations, the African Union, and the Intergovernmental Authority on Development have met to discuss peaceful solutions to the conflict in Sudan, repeating calls for an immediate ceasefire, opening a humanitarian corridor, and offering aid to people in need. Adebola Brookslyn Sunday reports.
Continuing situation in Sudan is engaging the attention of leaders around the world, especially those of the United Nations and the African Union, who are keen on finding a resolution as soon as possible. The African Union Commission Chairperson Moussa Faki Mahamat at the Union's headquarters in Addis Ababa said the Union is persuading the warring factions in Sudan on the need for a total ceasefire.
We also naturally discuss political issues, particularly on the crisis. The trilateral organizations have continued to work with the parties for advancing the ceasefire and opening the humanitarian corridors.
UN Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed said the United Nations is fully behind the African Union's proposal.
It is incredibly important that we are behind an African solution to this catastrophe in Sudan. We need a cessation of the hostilities. We also need to address the humanitarian needs that are needed in Khartoum, in the rest of Sudan, and get back onto that track of a process that is back to a democratic process for civilian rule.
In a separate meeting, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has called for an end to the conflict in Sudan, saying the country cannot afford such destruction at a desperate time.
And I believe that all need to come together and all need to use their capacity to put pressure for this horrible and I would say unjustified conflict to stop. There is no right. A country like Sudan that has suffered so much, that is in such a desperate economic and humanitarian situation, cannot afford a struggle for power between two people.
The warring parties in Sudan on Tuesday agreed on a 7-day ceasefire that will start this Thursday to pave the way for peace talks between the two factions, promoted and mediated by the neighboring South Sudanese President Salva Kiir, who is also the leader of a team of the Intergovernmental Authorities on Development Assembly of the Heads of States. Sudan's Ministry of Health said the clashes between the SAF and the RSF have killed more than 500 people and left over 4,000 others wounded so far. Adebola Brookslyn Sunday, NTA News.
Meanwhile, the first batch of Nigerian returnees totaling 376 have been airlifted from Aswan, Egypt to Abuja. Those in the second batch are expected to leave Aswan tomorrow. The military junta in Myanmar have released scores of political prisoners. Now, a review of their cases won them pardons, leading to their freedom, asking them to remain good citizens and join hands with the junta to rebuild Myanmar. Kolo Mohammed reports.
Even though still under house arrest, Aung San Suu Kyi's supporters and loyalists arrested for taking a stance in her support were released from prison yesterday in Myanmar. The released citizens were driven in official buses in groups to different parts of the country from the capital to be reunited with the family.
Nobody trusts anybody. This is a result of years and years of dictatorship, authoritarian rule. You always have to be careful. You don't know who's informing on whom. And this lack of trust has seeped into our very bones, in a sense. So this does not help to bring about reconciliation.
Analysts believe isolation by the international community of the junta is beginning to bite painfully. Kolom Mohammed, NTA News.
Airstrikes in response to rockets fired into Israel from Gaza escalated the situation between Israel and Palestinians in Gaza over the weekend. Huge losses we hear of lives on both sides. A truce has been reached, though, leading to an agreement for a ceasefire. Here is Kolom Mohammed again.
Israeli army and armed groups in Gaza have agreed on a ceasefire following a weekend of intense fighting, leaving dozens dead, including a 4-month-old baby Palestinians say was killed in an Israeli airstrike. Palestinians in Gaza conducted countless funerals over the last weekend, bringing emotions to deeper depths, making citizens' desire for peace paramount. 4 Israeli civilians were killed in a rocket fire, making it the largest loss of Israeli life in one fell swoop.
One of the reasons I think the Israelis are concerned, not even so much about Hamas, but Hezbollah, that has hundreds times more rockets than Hamas does. And so Israel really wants to keep the peace in the south as much as it can.
Prime Minister of Palestine thanked the envoys who brokered the ceasefire, calling on the United Nations to stop Israel's violence against Palestinians. Israeli Prime Minister blames armed groups in Gaza for the escalation, adding that Israel's right to defend itself will be upheld and implemented forever. Stakeholders pray this fire lasts. Kolom Mohammed, NTA News.
Russia plans to cut down 2023 Victory Day celebrations for security reasons and attacks from pro-Ukrainian forces. We'll get details now from Uche Ugochukwu.
Several Russian cities have announced they will scale back this year's Victory Day celebrations. Russian authorities have cited security reasons and attacks from pro-Ukrainian forces for the changes. Explosions and fires have occurred in Russia in recent weeks, but some have argued that the reduced events show the Kremlin is nervous about celebrations turning into shows of dissent against its invasion of Ukraine. Great pomp and shows of military might are the usual hallmarks of Victory Day, which marks the Soviet Union's victory over Nazi Germany on 9 May 1945. One of the day's most recognizable events is the Immortal Regiment procession, which sees people across the country marching, holding photographs of their relatives who fought in the World War II. Last year, President Vladimir Putin led the procession across Red Square in Moscow while holding a photograph of his father in uniform. This year, however, the Immortal Regiment will be held in other formats for security reasons. Officials have suggested that those who wish to commemorate their relatives should instead place photographs of war veterans in car windows, transfer their images to items of clothing, or change their social media avatars. Uche Ugochukwu, NTA News.
Kenyan President William Ruto welcomes Japan's support for the African Union's agenda. This was while he received the Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida in the capital, Nairobi, as part of his 4-leg African tour. Here is Uche Ugochukwu again.
Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida and Kenyan President William Ruto have agreed to strengthen their country's cooperation in areas related to decarbonization, infrastructure development, and bolstering economic ties.
Through my discussion with President Ruto, who took office after the democratic election of last September, I was given this opportunity to hear the voice of Africa directly as the presidency of the G7. I shall endeavor to reflect our discussion in the deliberations at the G7 Hiroshima Summit this month.
Kenya welcomes Japan's support for the implementation of the Africa Union's Agenda 2063, which is the continent's blueprint for sustainable development and management of strategic partnership.
During the meeting in Kenya's capital, Nairobi, the two leaders condemned Russia for its invasion of Ukraine while affirming the importance of the rule of law. They also agreed on promoting a free and open Indo-Pacific. The two leaders shared the view that enabling fair and transparent financial development is important for alleviating Kenya's debt problems. The move comes amid concerns about China having created debt traps for several African countries by providing them with large loans that have become difficult to repay, as such allowing Beijing greater leverage over their political affairs. Wednesday's visit to Kenya was the first by a Japanese prime minister since August 2016 and part of Kishida's four-leg African tour. Uche Ugochukwu, NTA News.
29 in service and 2 retired staff of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs have been commissioned and presented letters of conferment as ambassadors in situ with the mandate of upholding and promoting Nigeria's foreign policies to the best of their ability. Charles Alpha reports.
Simply giving you what rightly belongs.
You have earned it and therefore deserve the title of ambassador in situ. Minister of State Foreign Affairs Zubairu Dada told the new ambassadors as he presented letters to 31 of them in line with President Muhammadu Buhari's approval for the honor. These ambassadors have attained required grade level 16 and have proudly rendered the needed service to their nation.
The mandate, of course, is that they continue to serve this nation because they don't necessarily have to be posted to any particular mission to say they are ambassadors. No, what it means, simply means is that they have attained that level at which they should be recognized and given this commission as ambassadors. For those of them that are still in service, they may end up being appointed as ambassadors plenipotentiary at some point in time.
We're going to project the image of country better than even what we're doing now.
It's a lot to all of us, and we are very, very grateful to the President for finding us worthy of this honor. It's actually a call to duty.
The wealth of experience of those who have retired among them can come handy, and so they have been told to make themselves available when duty calls. The clear message was to make the best of representation anywhere they may find themselves while delivering on the mandate on which they have been commissioned and conferred these honors. Charles Alpha, NTA News.
The ECOWAS Commission has strengthened diplomatic relations with the African Union through the various engagements by the Office of the Permanent Representative of ECOWAS to the African Union. Ambassador Francis Gabriel Oke, in furtherance of his mandate at each engagement, highlighted the strategic and visibility roles that the ECOWAS Permanent Representation will play, not only as a regional economic community, but as one of the main building blocks of the African Union, pursuant to the implementation and objectives of the Agenda 2063. He also exchanges ideas with other leaders on key security and economic challenges faced by the West African blocs and how diplomacy can address these challenges in the continent. All right, let's take a quick break. We're back. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. The freedom of the press is the bedrock on which democratic principles and justice thrive across the globe. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres said this as the world marks the 30th anniversary of the World Press Freedom Day. Adobla Brookslyn Sunday reports that the UN chief urged nations to stop all kinds of threats, imprisonment and lies that target journalists for doing their jobs.
The increased concentration of the media industry into the hands of a few, the financial collapse of scores of independent news organizations, and an increase of national laws and regulations that stifle journalists are further expanding censorship and threatening freedom of expression. At least 67 media workers were killed in 2022, an unbelievable 50% increase over the previous year. Nearly 3/4 of women journalists have experienced violence online, and 1 in 4 have been threatened physically.
We need more than ever professional, free, independent journalism, a press that deciphers, discloses, and decodes. And it is up to us, collectively, to ensure its continued existence.
Shaping the future of rights, freedom of expression as a driver for all other human rights is the theme of this year's celebration. And joining us via Zoom from Gombe State to speak further on World Press Freedom Day is the Vice Chancellor of the Federal University of Kashari and renowned communications scholar, Professor Umar Upati. Nice to have you, Prof, on the news.
Thank you very much, and good evening, Nigeria.
All right, the world is today remembering the Press Freedom Day again. We see that happen every year. But has there been any improvement in free speech around the world?
Well, first of all, let me start by saluting our journalists, at least in Nigeria, for their sacrifices, for their efforts, and for their considerable contribution in keeping Nigeria going. You can imagine how Nigeria will look like without the efforts of our wonderful media men and women who have been working day and night, toiling in and out, and at some very great cost for them to keep Nigerians informed, to do what they're expected to do. Now, back to your question. I think it all depends on how you look at it. We have just heard what the United Nations Secretary General said about the quality of freedom that we have in the world. Yes, in a way you could say that there are considerable expansions in terms of the availability of channels of communication and also the openness for people to be able to link up with one another. However, there are some other aspects that you also need to look at as consequences for the increased openness because of the availability of the internet and the advancement in communication technologies. For example, because of the availability of the internet, the channels for communication considerably expanded, but at a cost. The cost, for example, in terms of the funding, the funds that are available for quality media content is decreasing. Secondly, if you look at the technologies are not available to everyone. Some parts of the world, particularly the West, have some kind of monopoly. They manufacture these things and they have total control over these technologies. Over here, we are dependent, and the technologies just come the way we'll be able to pay for them. Then the third one, if you look at, is the issue of content. You cannot talk about the media without talking about content. Now, what is the quality of the content that the media is able to disseminate? Okay. What is the quality in terms of creativity, in terms of inputs that the people can get? What is the pluralistic content of all of these things? Then the issue of safety of journalists themselves.
Okay, Prof, indeed,
So,
Indeed, we've seen the whole dynamics when it comes to journalism of today's world. But this year, the focus is on freedom of expression as a driver for all other human rights. What would you say is the nexus here?
Yes. When you talk of freedom for everyone in the society, you must first of all look at the kind of freedom that the media is able to enjoy, particularly in a democratic setting. The media is like the mouthpiece. The media is like the mediator. The media is like a reflection of the kind of society people are living in. So if the media is not free, certainly you cannot talk of political freedom, you cannot talk of even economic freedom, you cannot even talk of other kinds of freedom to access opportunities in a society. Just like one scholar once said, freedom is development. So without freedom, and freedom to be able to bring out the best that is in people, freedom for people to be pluralistic, freedom for people to express their own opinions in terms of how they are governed, to be able to contribute and to be able to participate. Once this freedom is not guaranteed, then you cannot be sure that there will be freedom for politics, there will be freedom for economics, or freedom for any other kind of human activity in the society. So the first freedom is freedom of expression. Of course, you can talk about freedom of life, you can talk about freedom of association and the other freedoms. But then, if you cannot express yourself, If your voice is taken away, then your life too will not be guaranteed. Somebody could take away your life and nobody can talk and nobody can challenge such draconian decisions. So the thing is quite clear, is quite relevant to contemporary society, that for any freedom to be able to exist, first, there must be freedom of plurality, of ideas to flourish, freedom and heterogeneity in terms of thinking, and freedom for people to express themselves both explicitly and implicitly without fear, without favor, and without any hindrance from any kind of censorship that we all know of.
All right, Prof. We have different acts, of course, that promote freedom of expression for Nigeria. Even the Information Act that allows journalists, or people, the general public, to get certain informations from different NTAs, or generally from, to give accounts, talking about NTAs or government public holders, so to say. Is that being implemented in Nigeria?
Well, there are issues. The good thing is that at least we have the law. And before we go to that point, first of all, you need to understand that the United Nations has a very clear provision on freedom of expression. If you come to the African Charter, it is also clearly explained. Then you come to our own Nigerian constitution, that freedom is also clearly given. Then the Freedom of of Information Act is there and is supposed to further enhance the constitutional provision that makes government accountable, and it is journalists or the media generally that is expected to undertake that role on behalf of the people. But naturally, there will be hindrances here and there. Yeah. There may be breaches, there may be violators and violations. Now, it is left for the civil society sector, for the media itself, and for the framers of the Constitution, as well as our legislators and our courts, to ensure that there is proper enforcement of this law, and then the protection and guaranteeing of the ability of our journalists to be able to do that. And don't forget, the law is not only for the journalists, it's for every other Nigerian. Yes. However, the media, being custodian of information for the public, are naturally those who are closer in relating with the law, with that particular law. But like I've said, there are many challenges that we should expect. Okay. And like the president once said, if we don't kill corruption, corruption will kill us. And corruption naturally fights back.
Thank you so much, Professor. Thank you so much, Prof. I know you have so much you want to say, but you've just hit the nail in the head. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right.
And I salute you, all our Nigerian journalists, and wish you better days ahead.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Let's turn to other issues. President Muhammadu Buhari has formally unveiled and launched the next long-term development plan for Nigeria, the Nigeria Agenda 2050 for implementation. The launch of the document took place on the sideline of the Federal Executive Council meeting at the Presidential Villa in Abuja. State House correspondent Jide Onifade reports.
This note, Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is now my honor and privilege to formally unveil and launch the next long-term development plan for Nigeria, the Nigeria Agenda 2050 for implementation. And God bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
President Muhammadu Buhari says the unveiling and public presentation of the Nigeria Agenda 2050 marks yet another milestone in the annals of history of the nation's planning experience post-independence.
It has also shown our administration's commitment to planning and plan implementation since we assumed office on May 29, 2015. The plan we are launching today has a vision of a dynamic, industrialized, and knowledge-based economy that generates inclusive and sustainable development for the country.
The President, on December 22, 2021, launched the first National Development Plan 2021 to 2025 that would be used to implement the long-term plan. Council on March 15, 2023, approved the Nigerian Agenda 2050 that is being launched now by the president.
The broad target is to ensure that Nigeria attains a per capita GDP of $33,328 United States dollars per annum that will place her among the top middle-income economies in the world by 2050.
The president applauds the steering committee led by the Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Zainab Ahmed, for delivering on the important national assignment. He is confident that given the measures already in place for continuous implementation, successive administrations will find the document useful in the delivery of electoral promises. In the State House, Jide Onifade, NTA News.
President Muhammadu Buhari has approved the termination of the appointment of Dr. Ferdinand Gyadom as project coordinator of the hydrocarbon pollution remediation project HYPREP. Consequently, President Buhari approves the appointment of Professor Nanibarini Zabe as the new project coordinator of HYPREP. Professor Zabe is a lecturer at the Department of Fisheries, Faculty of Agriculture, University of Port Harcourt. He is a renowned Ogoni expert in hydrobiology with experience and background in remediation, biomonitoring and restoration ecology. A statement issued from the office of the Minister of Environment, Mohammed Abdullahi, indicates that the appointment is with immediate effect. And we're done. Thank you very much for your time. I'm Ruth Aguele. My sign language interpreter is Shagun Ajayi. Bye.